Welcome to the YSPN Project, where Sikh values meet professional success. Join us on an exhilarating journey as we dive into the world of leadership, entrepreneurship, corporate success, all through the lens of our culture. From diverse backgrounds and various niches, we bring you the stories that inspire, the strategies that empower, and the wisdom that transcends industry.
Hey, Jasbir, welcome to the YSPN Project. Good to have you on.
Hey, thanks, Garrett. We've been talking for a few weeks now, so I'm glad we're finally doing this. Thanks for having me.
Before we get started, why don't you just introduce yourself to the audience and maybe describe what you do for work in simple terms?
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Jasbir from Singapore. I'm a father of two lovely kids, a husband to my wife, and for my work, I am a leadership consultant with a firm called Korn Ferry.
So, Korn Ferry, tell us a bit more about that organization and what they offer.
So Korn Ferry is a people and talent consulting firm. Most of you listening will probably know the big consulting houses like Mercer and BCG. These are strategy consulting houses. Look at Korn Ferry as a subset of strategy is your talent strategy. So we are a specialist in talent consulting. How do you attract the best talent? How do you keep and retain the best talent? So that's your retention schemes, your engagement policies, your rewards and incentives. How do you develop the best talent so that once you've hired them, how do you make sure that you're constantly growing and being ready for future roles? And then how do you identify from these top talent who's ready to take on the mantle for the next opening in the senior level positions? So that's your succession planning. So within this firm, I just specialize really in talent assessment, identifying who your high potentials and future leaders should be, and then their development. So really putting them through their paces in terms of both building the competencies that they need for the next role, getting the right experiences, and coaching them a bit on the way they engage with their people so that they are ready for that step up.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm dialing in from London and you're dialing in from Singapore. Why don't you tell us a bit about growing up in Singapore and what it means like to be a young Sikh in that country?
I think being a young Sikh in Singapore is quite an interesting concoction of opportunities, right? So Singapore is very multicultural, and so you benefit from the acceptance that the institutions of the country generally afford you. Schools are very set up to engage your diversity. You get Punjabi school, you have the chance to do your mother tongue. So lots of things are set up in your favor to support that. But at the same time, being a minority community as we are as Sikhs and being a minority within another minority, so Singapore Sikhs are part of the Indian diaspora and we're a minority within that, I think that created a community here that was very hell-bent on supporting one another. So from a young age, we've had surveillance, we've had mentorship, we've had the council of our elders, and that has in itself created a lot of opportunities. I remember always my young mentors from the surveillance days pointing me in the right direction career-wise, pointing me in the right direction to talk about who I should be when I grow up or what I should do. Lots of guidance, lots of mentorship from being in that little community. So it was almost like we had two lives, right? On one life, you were just being the Singaporean, integrating with the local Chinese, Malays, Indians, and then you retreated to your Gurdwara and the safe space of your community where people were like, okay. So now you're a leader in this sport. Okay, go in and you gotta step up. This is how you lead. Oh, in school, okay, this is how you grab those opportunities. Okay, career-wise, this is what you should do. Oh, in the army, this is how you tie a turban, and this is how you this and that and this and that. So it's lots of exciting support given to us being a minority within a minority.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that was a really interesting response, and I liked how you even mentioned things like the turban tying and the NS, which something I hadn't actually thought about before. And I guess taking a step forward into your professional career, lots of people now, there's lots of new jobs starting in today's world. And sometimes, we start studying and we don't actually know what job we end up in later. So I guess maybe taking a step back from that, consulting, that's a really interesting field to be working in. Was that the end goal you had in mind when you were making your university decisions, casting your mind back many years ago?
I mean, to your first point, though, I'm quite excited by that, right? We start studying and we end up doing jobs we never knew existed. When was the iPhone made, right? The iPhone was made, 2003, 2004, I forget the facts. And at that point in time, there was no such thing as app developers. There was no such thing as UX, UI, graphic designers. I mean, that created a whole balloon and a whole explosion of new jobs, all in the space of 4 or 5 years. People went into university and the whole market changed in a way for a better. So yeah, I totally resonate with that. And now with generative AI, we're entering university. For those entering university, 4 years' time, we're just at the start of Gen AI. What will that look like in 4 years' time? It could be a very different and very exciting landscape then. Well, back when I just finished the army, or I was in the middle of the Singapore Army, and I was applying to university. What was on my mind? What was on my mind was being a teacher, being a doctor, which I couldn't be, being a lawyer, being an engineer, being a accountant, right? So those are the big five professions we as Sikhs knew, right? And they were all professions. And there was a sixth one called businessman, right? Whatever that meant. So my path was I didn't know. What I did know was that I liked sport. And I liked helping people be their best because we had a sports psychologist come work with us when we were in our team, and that really blew my mind on how your mind can do powerful things and how you can unlock it to release your best self. And so I said, okay, let's go and be a sports psychologist. But in Singapore at that time, the market for a sports psychologist was very, very, very small. And my sister said, hey, Jasbir, when you made the decision to be a sports psychologist, or at least to learn psychology to be a sports psychologist, you did you do it because that was what you wanted to do in life, or did you do it because that's all you knew? You liked sports, so it was either be a PE teacher or a sports psychologist. And I said, well, yeah, it's really all I knew. So she said, okay, fine. If you only gave yourself two options and you chose one, that's really not the best choice, right? Why don't you pause? There's no need to rush into career. Why don't you study some more, do something that gives you more life experience, give you some breadth, and see something there. And to me, that was quite pivotal. It was like quite an aha moment to say, yeah, actually, I made I made a choice about my future based on the fact that, well, I wasn't doing very well in school, based on the fact that I only knew sport and did well in sport, didn't know anything about the business world. And so my sister's advice was to hit pause and just study a bit longer and figure yourself out. And she said, what do you want to do? I ended up pursuing a postgrad in law, started off as a lawyer for a short while, and then very quickly found myself back in the world of people and talent consulting, doing basically similar things to what I was doing now. So kind of a messy hodgepodge that led me back to helping people be their best, but not in the domain of sport. And that was really just pure happenstance.
So tell me a bit more about this happenstance. Was there something that you realized or a moment that you really knew sports psychology was maybe not the path for you and general people management or consultancy was?
So actually, that's two angles to that, right? So the first angle was while I was doing my undergrad, I met a mentor, and he asked, "Hey, Jess, what do you want to do?" Actually, he was looking to hire me as an intern for his digital media firm, and I had no interest in digital media whatsoever. And so he was like, "Well, what then do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I want to be a sports psychologist." He said, "Oh, okay." And this guy was a mentor from the Sikh community, right? So that's how we kind of roll in Singapore. We had very quite tight-knit community, people were helping each other out, and that was what he was doing, right? He said, hey, go speak to Sarah. She's just left McKinsey, she started a firm, and they've licensed this really cool program that the US Olympic swim team used in Beijing with Michael Phelps to prepare them mentally for the Olympics. And I said, oh, that's a really cool program. That sounds really like sports psychology, but it was done as a training program. So I went to speak to Sarah, and Sarah said, hey, okay, all right, you want to get trained in this work? Okay, sure, that'll be $4,000 for the trainer program. Then after you do one or two runs, I'll certify you. And I was like, Sarah, that sounds cool. I would love to be trained, but I mean, I don't have $4,000, and I spent it on a laptop because I was in the Bhangra group and they needed to make a website. So I said I can buy a Macintosh and I'll make a website with the templates. I mean, not the best career decision or whatever, but I didn't have money to pay for this course. So I said, Sarah, well, I have no money, but I have time. I have a 12-week, summer vacation between semesters. How about I work for you for free? And in return, you train me up in this program. So this is second year undergrad or something like that. And then I got certified in this program within that summer for free. And then subsequent years in my undergrad, I worked for Sarah for every now and then to be like a freelance trainer in this program. And in that journey, I had the chance to meet a lot of people, and that was brilliant. And then I decided, okay, you know what? Rather than pursuing sports psychology, I wanted to be a lawyer for that was the next big decision I made. As I finished my apprenticeship, I was about to start the 6-month bar program. A friend or a colleague from Sarah's academy, he was like, hey, Jasbir, I'm leaving McKinsey. I'm joining this company called Hydric, and we have an opportunity to build a leadership development program for one of our large clients. I think you'd be a good person to join our team as one of the young talents within the firm. Would you like to join? I said, no, man, I'm about to take the Singapore bar and then go back to being a lawyer. Well, he's like, well, the bar, is it a full-time thing? You're just studying, right? Why don't you come in part-time? And I was like, okay, fine. What do I got to lose? So I did 3 days a week in this firm called Hydrick and Struggles with him, the person I met from Sarah's team. And the 3 days a week were wonderful. I've realized that actually in this leadership consulting firm, I could pursue the goal of helping people be better versions of themselves. I could do it in an environment that was very diverse and acknowledged your individuality and respected your opinions, which is a large contrast from the legal industry in Singapore at that time. And if I'm being completely honest, do it in a business that enjoyed and appreciated work-life balance as well. So that was quite a clear eye-opening experience. Hey, wow, this thing called leadership consulting, it's a corporate firm, it's professional services, it's respected, it's just as rewarding as financially as a legal career, but you are treated in a much more empowering and much more inviting environment. It's quite an easy decision to make. So I had a chat with my dad and I had a chat with my legal mentor. And I said, look, I want to try this out. And they were like, all right, let's do it. And so I said, I'll give this leadership consulting piece 1 year, and if it goes well, I'll keep going, and if not, go back to the law. What do I got to lose, right? 1 year never ended. It kept going, and I'm still here in a different firm.
It's such an awesome story to hear, Jasbir, and I loved the happenstance moments that you mentioned there. I think something that's common that you actually did when you were younger, though, was have this really entrepreneurial spirit and being open-minded towards new opportunities. Do you want to talk a bit more about that, especially looking back now?
I mean, at that point in time, it was really just about having fun, being curious, and living your best life, right? And to me, living your best life means just trying new things at that point in time. A couple of years ago, read the book. Actually, it's here. Phil Knight, Shoe Dog. Okay, if I reach out, let me see if you can show it to you guys. So Phil Knight, he's the founder of Nike Shoe Dog, and there was a podcast which he did. And on the podcast, he says that people make this mistake. People think that they graduate uni and they need to know what they have to do in life. Like suppose like graduation, putting on that cap means, okay, I'm wise now and I know my path. But that's wrong. That's such a difficult situation to force yourself into, because that puts a lot of pressure on a young mind. He says actually finding your path and your career shouldn't happen till like you're 30 years old. And your 20s and your early 30s are a chance for you to experiment. Now, I didn't know that. I was crippled with self-doubt as I was delaying, finding that path. But, with my dad and my sister and the people around me, I was encouraged in a good way. But I wish I knew that now, right? Like, and I fully resonate. In your 20s, university classes are important, but the clubs and societies, the businesses you can start, the locations you can travel to, much like yourself, right? The overseas internships, it's just life experimentation. That's what university is, life experimentation. And the experiments that you do in uni is a chance to say, okay, maybe this is my path. And then you start that path, right? For me, I started that lawyer path for a little while, and then because of all the experiments and the people you meet in uni, that happenstance happens, right? Somebody that you met 10 years ago, 5 years ago, say, hey, I remember you, let's do this together. And that opportunity turns into a new path. And you keep turning paths until you feel, hey, yeah, it works, right? It works. You feel meaning, and you get rewarded for it, and you feel like your skills are being used, and then it works. So I think experimentation in the 20s and early 30s is severely underrated.
I love that, and I really hope our audience takes something away from what you just said. I think it's really important. Keeping in mind with this experimentation and sort of, I guess, lean towards the side hustle idea now, the reason I actually originally came across you was this YouTube channel called Daily Mind Hacks. And this was something I think you maintained while working, while balancing other responsibilities. Do you want to talk a bit more about how you started this and what it was about?
Yeah, Daily Mind Hacks was fun. I kind of wish I'm still doing it right now, but yeah, it was a really fun time. So Daily Mind Hacks was really born out of the time where I had left consulting and I went into the National University of Singapore in a pseudo-academic, pseudo-administrator role. So I was in the career services function and I was responsible for helping students become more holistic rather than just doing their university specializations. How do we create students that are more emotionally intelligent? How do we create students that are more self-aware, more able to take charge of their lives and be self-directed? And it was an excellent time where we were having the chance to see how education was being done and using my professional training background, try to change the way education was being done in the classroom in the universities at the same time. And in that space, I happened to chance upon this YouTuber named Ali Abdal, and there was another one, Matt Diavela, and they both were so cinematographic in the way they produced their videos. And their videos were educational content. Topics were a bit different. Maybe productivity was the topic, but it was done in such an enlightening and engaging way at the same time. It was edutainment, right? And then I was like, okay, this medium of learning is going to replace what's happening in these universities in some way or form. And I think in some ways it is, of course, not fully, but in some ways, many people choose to learn informally through these mediums than to go for a professional course, right? And I felt, okay, if I want to keep up, if I see myself as an educator, if I want to keep up with the way tech is changing the way education works, let's experiment. I love what they're doing, so let's see whether I could do it too. And obviously, it's just a steep learning curve, learning how to edit videos, standing in front of the camera, writing a script, keep storytelling almost. I mean, there was a whole lot of new competencies that I never even considered. But doing it was great because it made me put myself out there. It made me learn all those skills I just spoke about. And it was very timely because, again, happenstance, right? COVID hit, and then my entire department in the university started getting worried about pay cuts and job cuts and whatnot. And I was like, oh man, yeah, job cuts. I've just had a second kid, yada yada yada. And it turns out because of what I did online, I suddenly became the most important person, in that time, helping that department digitize content. Like, oh, okay, this little experiment I was doing on my free time suddenly has made me quite relevant to help everyone in this team digitize the way they engage students. So, okay, good. All right, good for me. I've made myself a little bit more relevant in this business. Okay, and then because I was putting stuff online, the consulting firms, which I was in the industry before, the consulting firms were also now looking to do the same thing. And that's when they were like, hey, Jess, let's have a chat. We want to come back into consulting. We are digitizing a lot of our work. I think, you have both the consulting skills, the education skills, and then, of course, this digital video production and education skill set, which is so relevant in our leadership development work. That experiment to just, keep up with technology and the changes created opportunities inside, created opportunities outside. And I think, yeah, we should keep experimenting. Some people call it hustle culture. I don't see it that way. I think we hustle. Hustle culture has that term of like, just keep going. I think it's maybe mindfully experimenting. That's how I like to be thoughtful about it. If tech is disrupting the landscape we are in, can we experiment with the tech in adjacent spaces? So I was a teacher. The adjacent space of tech disruption was video. Can I experiment with that? And that kept me relevant. So now, what's the next experiment, right? Gen AI potentially. Can I do something with Gen AI to keep ahead of tech? Because I guess there's one famous thing, right? AI is not going to take your job. It's the person using AI that will take your job. So that goes for any new technologies. Call it hustle culture, call it experimentation, but I think it's just being curious. Have fun, play.
Yeah, it's really, really cool to hear you describing how you went about this journey and the skills you learned and how, again, happenstance made it really important to that moment in your time in your career. I think happenstance, we keep using that word and it's come up quite frequently, as well as some of you touched on there, like mindfulness. I think to me, both these situations could fall under Sikhism, right? And Sikhi. And so I guess I want to ask you, how do you think Sikhi or being a young professional Sikh has influenced your career choices?
Yeah, I think being a young Sikh, I mean, I had the real privilege of growing up where the Sikh community was quite strong. Every Sunday there was youth programs and there was kirtan going on, tailored to the youth and sakis and inspirational stories. And it became quite ingrained in me, and it became very evident when I was in Singapore. We call it junior college, and then just before the army, when you start to think about university and careers, that you wanted it to be in service of someone or something. Careers and jobs isn't just about feeding yourself and doing good for yourself. I think there's a balance, doing well and doing good. So doing well for yourself, right? That's important. We need to feed our families. We need to, enjoy life a certain way. But doing good for the world around us was just as important, right? So in Sikhism, we talk about seva a lot. We talked about, kirat karni and living an honest life. And to me, that framed and guided the career choices. So for me, it was always, where can I take my skills and do good for the world? There are some lawyers can take their skills and do good as defense attorneys or social activists. There's some people who take their skills and do good in other ways and form, teaching, medicine, whatnot. For me, I wasn't fond on the sciences. I didn't really enjoy my time as a lawyer so much. But I saw that, okay, I had this skill set, this passion for people development that would help build leadership capabilities in teams. If a team is led better, everyone in the team goes home happier, they're happier with their families. That was how I diagnosed what my contribution could be. So Sikhism definitely was a big part of that, and at the back of my head, knowing that whatever I did had to be for the good of people around me and the society around me, and also well for myself. Doing good, doing well. I think those are two very important things.
So you mentioned they're really benefiting from a strong Sikh community and the programs and support that is offered you, even from your first mentor, which you talked about at the start of the podcast. Now you're actually giving back as a facilitator at things like the Sikh Youth Australia leadership camps. Why have you come back and how have you found the time and space to do so?
So that's a very kind question. It puts me in a very good light, but I think there's a bit more self-interest behind the decisions to volunteer in these camps and these Sikh community things. I think as we're building our professional skill sets, you'll find in the professional services at least, there's always the expert and then the protege or the expert and the apprentice, right? And the apprentice always carries the bag. And I felt that by volunteering in the Sikh camps and in Singapore, we have this thing called Sikh Sewa, it's another community or committee. I got to then take what I learned from work, but was not old enough or white bearded enough to do it for clients because I was too young. I got to do it with the C camps, right? The workshops or the roles I chose to hold in the committee. So, like for example, in Sikh Sevaks, I held the role of head of talent management for a little while, right? And because I was interested in that line of work, so I got to use the Seva as a chance to better my professional skills. Now that's a bit selfish. I got to use the Seva to make a lot of friends, and I hold a lot of friends very dearly in the SYA community as well as the Singapore Sikh community. So I think Seva is a double benefit sword, right? It's on one end you get to help people and you feel good about that, but on the other hand you also build a lot of professional skills through the work that your Seva lets you do. And so I chose to see it that way. I don't know, it doesn't sound
No, that's
doesn't sound
good.
very kind, but it's honest.
No, I think it's very good.
It could be Seva could be a way to just have fun, right? And that's great, and a way to just give, and that's great too. But where the opportunity allows it, if you can combine your Seva in a way that builds your confidence in your professional domain, that's a win-win. That's what I had the chance to do with SYA. So thank you to
Perfect.
everyone in SYA watching this. As a young facilitator in the leadership programs, or rather with our clients, as a young facilitator, your bosses are so sensitive about the clients. They don't want to put a young guy in front of an important client, in front of senior leaders. So how do you build your confidence then? How do you build your technical skills to answer difficult questions from participants, to deliver an engaging program? I got to practice it with SYA and other safer environments. And then when the boss finally has no choice but to give you the chance, they're like, oh, okay, this guy's looks like he's a lot more experienced than we thought he was. And so it works to your benefit.
I think that's a very interesting response and actually quite an insightful one. I have one last question for you, and this is totally unprepared. I really want to throw it at you. But first of all, how old are your kids? You've got two, right?
Yeah, 6 and 4 right now.
6 and 4. Okay. I want you to imagine that your kids are just about to graduate high school and start
man.
university. And maybe go off and venture out into another part of the world. What advice would you give them?
I think stay curious and cultivate your ability to learn in uncomfortable situations. I don't think the way the world is going, when they go to university, the jobs they have in mind when they graduate may not actually exist, or they would be drastically different from what they thought they were signing up for. And so let university be the time of experimentation. And if you can finish your university degree knowing how to learn in ambiguous new situations, that's a success, right? That learning agility is probably the most underrated skill. To put it simply, curiosity is that most underrated skill, right? Because if you have that curiosity, then you can learn a lot of things and find yourself thriving when others might be struggling with ambiguity.
All right, perfect. And just to finish off, because I feel like you have so many great resources, you mentioned Shoe Dog by Phil Knight there. Are there any
Right.
other books or podcasts that you'd recommend our listeners who are maybe really curious about where their career direction is headed? Yeah, check out.
Okay, career direction. There was one article I read many years ago by Clay Christensen. He wrote The Innovator's Dilemma, and the article was called How Will You Measure Your Life? So that's one to check it out. It's on Harvard Business Review. Um, Yeah, from like thinking about your life and the meaning it will have on the world. In terms of choosing a career, I do subscribe to the Ikigai philosophy, right? That Japanese philosophy of finding a nice middle ground between the skills you have, the value you hold. Okay, some books have fallen, but that's right. The skills you have, the values you hold, the interests you carry, and the money you need to live a good life. So finding that right balance, finding that something that suits your purpose, your values, your skills, your interests, and as well meets your very monetary needs. So Ikigai, I think that was quite good. Podcasts. I do like this fun one. So this was useful for me because I came from a background that wasn't corporate, right? I did like a social sciences undergrad. I never really worked in like the P&L type heavy commercial roles. I wasn't in one of those at the start of my career. So this podcast called Business Wars by Wandery was marvelous. It shows it compares, well, it tells a story of two different businesses fighting with each other for market share and whatnot. And it's done in the most riveting way, great storytelling. So check it out. If you want to learn about the world of business and the different things there in a really fun and subtle way, you'll learn it through the stories of like Netflix versus Blockbuster, Adidas versus Nike, Marvel versus DC, WWE versus WCW, like all of these big business wars are told in such a fun way. I mean, that's a fun way to learn about the world of business, if you ask me.
Awesome. I've got so many insights. I'm really glad I was able to have this conversation with you, Jasbir. And I just want to give you a huge thank you on behalf of the YSPN team and our listeners for giving your time and story.
Hey, my pleasure, Kirith. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you for tuning in to the YSPN Project. Don't miss out on future episodes. Be sure to follow us on Spotify, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Just search YSPN to stay connected with our upcoming physical events in Australia and New Zealand, virtual events, interviews, and much more. See you in the next podcast.